What's up, guys? This is Coach Lambert. I'm going to take you through a couple examples on solving quadratic equations by factoring. This is 7-6. Before I get going on a lesson, hope you guys and your families are safe. Just know these next, however long it's going to be, we'll get through it. It may be tough at times. We're going to have some issues and some snafus. Nothing we can't work through, okay? I want to take you guys through a little bit on the lesson. I know I posted the video on the author of the book. She can be quite boring at times. I'm hopefully going to do a little bit better job touching on this. The last month or so, we've factored. We've done factoring and factoring and factoring and more factoring. All we're going to do now is add one additional step. For instance, in previous sections, we factored a trinomial down to this. Well, we're now going to have this. The only thing different is it's going to be an equation. Okay, and you guys know an equation is a mathematical sentence that contains an equal sign. So all we're going to have now is an equation, an equal sign. Okay, and one of the main things from this section is called the zero factor property. And what it states is this. If you're multiplying two things times one another, we know one of them has to be zero or both of them have to be zero. So based on that zero property right here, I'm going to set each one of these factors equal to zero. If I know that x minus 3 times x plus 1 equals 0, then I know either x minus 3 equals 0 or x plus 1 equals 0. Okay? So now I'll solve each. I add 3 to each side, and I get x is 3. Over here, I subtract 1 from each side. X is negative 1. All right? So that one was pretty easy. Now, I think the ones that most people probably struggle with might have been something like this. Let's see. X squared minus 9x minus 22 equals 0. When solving these quadratic equations, the very first thing you need to do is make sure that you have 0 on one side of your equation. If it's not, bring whatever's on this side to the other side so where we can get 0 on one side. Well, this one already has 0 on one side, so we need to factor this left side. And what we've known is most trinomials factor to two binomials. Okay? And whether you do trial and error or what method you use, it doesn't matter. We know x and x. We know plus and minus. And we're looking for the factors of 22 that subtract to 9. That's going to be 11 and 2. Remember, the larger number has to go with the sign of the middle term. So now you can see I'm right back to where I was when I did the last example. If I know x plus 2 times x minus 11 equals 0, then I know one of these has to be 0. So I set each one equal to 0. I solve it, subtract 2 from each side, add 11 to each side, and I have it solved. Okay? These are some of the easier examples. I think the ones you guys may have struggled with, and I had some guys who emailed me. I want to go over a couple of those ones that they struggled with. Okay? Remember, the very first thing you need to make sure you have 0 on one side of your equation. So for instance, if you have this, and it says solve 4x squared minus 28x equals negative 49. I just told you the very first step is to make sure you have 0 on one side. I don't have 0 on either side. I'm going to add 49 to each side, which will give me negative 49 plus 49 is 0. I move this to the other side. Now I have 0 on one side. Now I go through my steps to factor the left side. And I can tell just by looking that this is a perfect square trinomial. Meaning that if I take the square root of 4x squared, it's 2x. I know because that's a plus, both are going to be minus. And the square root of 49 is 7. 2x minus 7 squared equals 0. We all know that means this. And because those are the exact same things, I only need to set one of them equal to 0. I add 7 to each side. I divide each side by 2. X is 7 over 2. So you can see this example here, you had an additional step because we didn't have 0 on one side yet. That's the very first thing we need to make sure. Now, let's try another one. Okay? All right, we got another example here. We don't have 0 on one side, so we've got to be able to do something here. But subtracting 4 doesn't really help me because these terms here are being multiplied. So subtracting 4 and bringing it to this side doesn't help me. So what I need to do first is I need to distribute. So I do that to get 2x squared minus 7x equals 4. Now, because this is addition and subtraction on this left side, I can now subtract 4 from both sides. That gives me 2x squared minus 7x minus 4 equals 0. Now I go through my steps to factor this because I do have 0 on one side now. Okay? I'm actually going to, instead of do this one by trial and error, I'm going to do this one by grouping, just to keep you guys on your toes. Remember, with factoring by grouping, the first term stays the same, the last term stays the same. My two middle terms, okay, because this is a minus, I know one's going to be a plus, one's going to be the minus. 2 times 4 is 8. I'm looking for the factors of 8 that subtract to 7. That's 1 and 8. Remember, the larger number goes with the sign of the middle term. So the 8 goes here, the 1 goes here. So now we're going to factor by grouping. If you look at our first grouping, we take out a GCF, which is just x, which leaves you with 2x plus 1. Right here, we take out a GCF of negative 4, which also leaves us with 2x minus 1. So now I actually have, 2x plus 1, excuse me. So these match up. So I take out my GCF of 2x plus 1, which leaves me with x minus 4. 0 property states that one of these has to be equal to 0. We set both of them equal to 0. I subtract 1, then divide by 2. I get x is negative 1/2. I add 4 to each side. I get x is 4. Okay, and I got one last example I want to get through. A student emailed me and had trouble with this one on the My Math Lab assignment. Now guys, when we do any My Math Lab assignment, if you run into any issue, any trouble, ones you don't understand, take a picture of it and post it on Schoology. I'll try to answer as many as I can throughout the day, okay? Tomorrow's homework you'll see is actually a homework. It's not listed as a quiz, so you'll be able to see your errors right away when you do it, okay? The one I want to go over now is this one here. Okay, if you notice, we do have 0 on one side already here. Okay, so now all I know is I have two factors being multiplied. I'm going to set each one of them equal to 0. I'm going to divide each side by 9 to get x is 0. I'm going to add 4 to each side to get x is 4. Okay, so because 0 was already on one side by itself, this one was pretty quick. I'm going to leave you guys with this last one. A student had trouble with this one in My Math Lab last night. Okay? You can notice the very first thing I told you we needed to do is to get 0 on one side. I don't have 0 on one side. And subtracting x doesn't make any sense yet because I have two factors here being multiplied. So I actually, just like the other example where we had to distribute first, I actually have to FOIL here. So I'm going to get x squared plus 8x plus 12. Now I can subtract x from both sides, and that will allow me to get 0 on one side. So you can see I now have 0 on one side. I'm going to factor. It's going to be x plus 4, x plus 3. I'm going to set each one equal to 0, and I'm going to get x is negative 4, and x is negative 3. Okay? So again, guys, make sure you have 0 on one side of the equation. The side that has the terms, you're then going to factor, okay? Once you factor it, then set each one equal to 0 and solve the equation, okay? So the time we put in, the 3-4 weeks of factoring, is really going to make this easier for you, okay? So I hope this cleared up a few things. Tomorrow's homework assignment is going to be on the same type stuff. If you run into any issues, please take a picture. Please post a question in Schoology because one of your classmates may have the exact same question. All right, guys, thanks.